Hey, welcome to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf. We're going to dive right in today. We got to follow on part 3 of our series on surviving in the post-COVID economy. And this really deals with change, which is 2021 is a turbulent year, following on the wave of chaos that 2020 threw at you. And here is yet another key strategy for well, not for winning, but a key strategy that is missed. This is something that leaders get wrong in business a lot, and it will destroy your efforts to adapt and make changes that are needed in order to thrive going forward in the post-COVID economy. And here it is: training. Now, stay with me for a second. Here, the problem is as you implement changes, the people that are doing something different need to be trained, right? Now, that could be a 5-minute walkthrough. That could be here, let's show what's going to be. It could be something simple. It could be something extremely complicated that's rolling out over several months, depending on the level of change. If you're seizing a new market opportunity, kind of a big deal, right? That could be something that's very complicated with a lot of moving parts, requires a lot of training, because of the level of change that is occurring. Installing a new software system is a classic example of change in business arena. Shifting to a better remote work environment software is something that many companies have been doing, trying different alternatives. Won't get into different software packages. Not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is, training is about skills transfer. Let me say that again. Training is about skills transfer. So one of the problems with training is it's not training, it's education. It's not focused enough. It's not designed for the skills transfer. I got an example on this. Bear with me for a second. No, let's dive right in. We're going to be consistent with what I'm going to explain next. So on the skills, on the education, one of the things, personal example for me, was the first workshop that I developed was actually two of us did, developed at the request of Hughes Aircraft for their systems engineering lab in the 1980s. It was a 2-day workshop. Not going to go into the topic. That's not the point here. It was a 2-day workshop to make sure that we got all the information that these engineers needed in order to have the skill, to have the requisite skills, the needed skills to implement what we were teaching them. 5 years later, we had the same training down to 4 hours, and it scaled depending on the job description, what people were doing. Sometimes we were teaching it in 20 minutes, sometimes we're teaching in 4 hours, and it was more effective than our 2-day training. Here's why. We were given too much information. It was education, not training. We got it honed down to what did they really need in order to have the skills needed to apply in their workflow to get the desired outcome that the company had in order to achieve the business outcome, the business objective that they had. So think about that. When looking at doing the skills transfer, it's a lot easier if you're walking somebody through something simple, right? So let me move on to the next thing. I don't want to drag this out. So here's the first thing: education versus training. Too often it's education, not the skill transfer design training. And I'm checking some notes over here to make sure I cover everything I want to cover with you. So next thing is it's all done at one time, like this 2-day training that I mentioned, right? We're doing all the training up front and going, okay, now go forth and apply it in your workflow. It's done all at once instead of breaking it down to implementable pieces. And even if it's not even if it's not part of here's the steps to implement, still need to be able to break down the content, the information pieces small enough that you can train it in a classroom, test it, apply it, practice within the training environment, then go out and apply it in their workflow on the job site. So hold that thought, because we're going to come back to an example with this. So there's no application lab, right? That practice time is hugely important. You're teaching them a new skill. We're having them change, which is part of changing. It's harder to get people to change. It's harder to retrain than to train in the first place, because now you've got to get them out of what they were doing and into the way you need it done, right? Stop doing it the way it's done before. Do it the new way that's better. That takes more in-depth time and practice to get it in their DNA. So it becomes their natural, when they think about it, that's their natural response, the new way to do it. So it needs to be application lab. Another key failure in that is there's no guidance for management coaching after the training. This is a best practice in training. This is something I learned last year during the pandemic. The first training, first workshop that I co-designed, that I told you about, that was in the 1980s. So I'm still learning stuff, and this was blindingly obvious, to not just have follow through, but to actually, as part of the follow through, have pre-programmed support for management to say, look, here's how you support these people in implementing what they've learned in the training. This is how you support them in shifting to the new skills. This is how it ties in to their performance reviews, to their job description, to their goals, to the company's goals, to the manager's goals, right? To have that coaching guidance is crucial for being successful. So this is all part of what you could call just-in-time training, right? Training that's needed for a new skill in order to achieve a business objective. So you break it down to small steps in honing those, in developing those skills, depending on how big it is. So let's say it's a big project, big change. There's a lot of big change going on in businesses right now. You may be experiencing that within your business. So you break it down and say, okay, here's the first part of the skill. We're going to train on that. We're going to practice it, put it in place. Management follows up in weekly conversations, weekly meetings with the people who are going through the training. So it's being implemented as you go along. That's the best practice formula. If you're talking with people that are implementing training for you and they're not following that model, stop. You're going to waste a lot of money. You're going to be part of the 70%. Ken Blanchard Companies talks about how 70% of business initiatives to implement changes fails. You're going to be part of that 70%. So, because we did another company that I worked with, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, we were still following what at that time was best practice, what we're doing, but we're doing all the training up front and then going out and implementing afterwards. The problem is, after you take people through, and because it was 20 hours of training, by the time they got done with the 20th hour, they weren't remembering what they learned in the first 5, because it's skills transfer, right? We needed them to practice it in the workplace. Fast forward to the just-in-time training model. And this was the model that we used in the case study that's in my book. It's going to be released in probably in July, the second edition of Creating Business Value, where working with that company, we went through, okay, today we're going to spend a couple hours in the classroom, learning a new skill. We're going to spend some time practicing that in the classroom. Then in the second half, we're going to spend the second half day out in the business. This was a manufacturing company, so we're out on the manufacturing floor implementing what they learned that day. Then the next morning, we do an after action review that night. Then the next morning, we'd start something new. And each part of that was part of a sequence in order to develop changes they needed in their company. They had powerful results. The key was they owned the change. The people got it in their DNA. They thought differently about their work and how to go about it. When we were finished with the training, it happened fast. The training was 2 weeks. Training and implementation was 2 weeks. Then we took 2 weeks to get to run the new processes they had developed, and to get numbers that the company's cost accountants could say, yeah, you know what, this is the results we got. And they got big results in their test project. In 30 days, they got a 40% productivity improvement on their biggest manufacturing line. They had 3 production lines running within their facility, and that was pretty good. Imagine that, 30 days. If if you're most expensive, the thing that takes up most of your resources, the productivity on that could be improved by 40% in 30 days. How would that affect your business? So those are the kind of, I'm not saying you'll get those kind of results. Legal beagles will say, hey, now, they're not saying you'd get those kind of results. We're saying is you can get astounding results. You get better results by following the best practice. So this is the key strategy is doing the skills transfer correctly to meet your business objective. You got to have your business goal, the desired behaviors. This is where the training comes in. The desired behaviors that you need for your people to achieve the business goal, and then you set up your training strategy, your training content to support that, the strategy for the training should be the just-in-time training we just talked about. So, what are your thoughts on that? You think that's all wet? You think I'm, out of my mind on that? Let's hear about it. Press the like button. Let's get some comments. I want to hear from you. This is a conversation, right? We're going to keep this short. So let me know. I want to hear from you on what your experience are. What kind of changes are you implementing? What do you see as key strategies for surviving and thriving in the post-COVID economy? Thanks for joining us for Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and I will see you on the trail.